Good morning. Welcome to the Parks, Arts, Transparency, and Education Subcommittee. And Councilman Waring is on the phone today, and we have Councilman Nowakowski and Councilman Valenzuela. It will be here shortly. What I do have to say is I want to say hi to my 5-year-old Sophia, who is superhero of the day, and she had to get some estimation stuff. So we gathered that together. We did a picture for her of her family and all the items. And she had to have a special guest today, and I was unable to be there today because I have my subcommittee meeting. So I want to do a shout out to my little Sophia for understanding and sacrificing that her mom wasn't able to read with her today. So I just had to say that. So the first item on is Parks and Recreation Board update. Item number 1 is call to order. So I'm calling the meeting to order. I need approval of the minutes. There is a slight change in the minutes where it says on page 8, Alhambra, and it was referenced instead of Wilson. So we will make that change. Is somebody willing to make a motion on the minutes?
I'd like to make a motion. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The motion passes. Now, items 3 through 6 are for information only. There are no presentations planned. However, staff will be available to answer questions that is regarding those items. As you see on the screen, there are areas where you can go and look to see if you want to know about those items.
I have
Yes.
a comment on item number 3, the Parks and Rec Board update. Just going over the minutes of the Parks Board minutes. There was item number 3 where they talked about the Phoenix Center for the Arts update. According to the agenda, it was going to be an update on the Phoenix Center of the Arts. It turned out to be more of a ask for the North Building and the importance of expansion of that program. And then they had a video that was presented to the board. I think that in the future, we're going to be having a RFP on this building, and that we need to be very fair and very transparent when it comes to the RFP process. So I think that we need to respect all those different entities or nonprofits that are looking at maybe the possibility of using that building and not letting an organization or a nonprofit have an advantage in going in front of the board and presenting a presentation on the North Building itself. So I think that we need to mark that down in our agenda if we're going to actually have a presentation about the North Building. Make sure it's on the agenda so people that want to talk about the North Building can actually be there. So just for the future, make sure that if there's any discussions about the North Building, that it's put on the agenda so we can have the appropriate people there to address it.
So you are asking for, in the future, if there is an agenda item on the board, Parks and Recs, regarding the North Building, that it needs to be transparent and it be that the item be North Building.
Absolutely.
Okay. We could also ask, and I'm going to add this to our request, to have an update regarding the North Building.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Councilman Waring, anything on items 3 through 6?
No, I'm good.
Thank you. Items 7 and 8 are for consent. There are no presentations planned. However, staff will be available to answer any questions. Are there any questions regarding 7 and 8?
No.
Anybody want to make a motion? On 7 and 8? No?
I'll make a motion to approve items 7 through 8 as consent items.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Item 9, Athletes for Life. This was a presentation on our past meeting, and please welcome to the subcommittee.
Chairwoman Pastor and subcommittee members. We have Karen Williams, who's the Deputy Parks and Recreation Director, Dr. Crespo with Arizona State University, and also we have, is it Frank? Yes, also with the Parks and Recreation Department. So they're gonna introduce item number 9, Athletes for Life. Thank you.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, childhood obesity is a problem in Phoenix. And the two gentlemen to my right have worked very hard on an effective solution researched for addressing obesity. Under the leadership of Frank Ray at the South Mountain Community Center, in a public-private partnership then with ASU, Dr. Crespo is an assistant professor at Arizona State University. He is also a part of the School of Nutrition and Health, and he has been our lead researcher of coming up with a solution for obesity, which is what is different about our Athletes for Life sports fitness program than any other program that fits so nicely under the umbrella of Fit Phoenix. And so Dr. Crespo is going to walk us through some slides.
Good morning. Buenos dias. My name is Noe Crespo. Thank you for having us here. Today I'm going to give you really a snapshot of the program because we're doing a lot, and I think that this provides a very nice summary. So what we're doing is we established a very good partnership with the long-term commitment that we develop a partnership that is sustainable in community environments and that is also effective. So the program itself aims to improve cardiovascular fitness through improvements in sports performance and fitness performance, and also through improvements in health behaviors such as dietary behaviors in children and families. This is a summary of the different aspects of the program. So initially, we are targeting 6 to 11-year-old children because we know that physical activity behaviors drastically drop in adolescence. So from a prevention standpoint, we want to establish these behaviors long-term, and so we're starting at a very young age, but also working with their parents. It's a 12-week program, twice a week, delivered at the South Mountain Community Center. Our target for the next few years is 160 families. So we're taking this slow, but in steps. The program is being designed and delivered by ASU students from different disciplines. And the program components are emphasizing exercise and sports skill building, improving dietary behaviors, and including the parents in this dietary behavior change. The program is bilingual in English and Spanish, and at the end of the program, we have a very fun Olympics event, which culminizes all the activities that the parents and the children have been learning. And in terms of evaluation, we are not only interested that parents enjoy the program and the children enjoy the program, we also want to know that it is effective. So we are really evaluating rigorously the different components of the program. So up on your slides, you see different components of the evaluation. So we do have the parents fill out a survey to assess different behaviors. We do take anthropometric measures such as height and weight. We are also assessing cardiovascular disease risk factors by drawing blood and assessing physical activity and performance via a 1-mile run. I'm going to share with you briefly just the preliminary results of a pilot program that we conducted last year. So this was a 6-week program with 24 parents and 37 children. You will see up there on the slides that many of the parents have had reported gestational diabetes. So it appears that this is a program that is providing a service to a community that would benefit from this type of program. And in terms of fitness improvements, we did see that the children improved in fitness performance such as push-ups. We also did see that they improved in a 20-yard dash, so this is a sprint, and they also improved in the half-mile run time. So we are seeing that the program does improve things that we're interested in, which is cardiovascular fitness. And here are several pictures of the program. So these are snapshots of different components of the program. Some of these were taken at the Olympics event. As you see there's soccer drills. There's also running activities with the parents involved. Here's a few pictures of the children receiving awards at the Olympics event. Also the parents receiving recognition for their participation. And also here are a few pictures of the students from ASU who are actively involved in the project. The parents posing also for the pictures, and a few more pictures of the activities that we've been coordinating and implementing. And so to conclude, it appears that this type of program is accepted by the community, is enjoyed by the community. It has potential to improve health because it appears that we are influencing a very important parameter of health, which is fitness, and also dietary behaviors. And to think of future directions, there are many ways we can expand on the program. Other age groups, adolescents is also another age group that I think we can begin to think about expanding to other sites and certainly expanding our collaborations. And also evaluating long-term health outcomes. It's one thing to see improvements now, but can these improvements be sustained? And that's an important question that we want to answer with this type of program. So we want to thank the families and participants, the City of Phoenix Parks and Recreation Department, ASU students for their support, and recently we were funded by American Heart Association to continue this work. So we want to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the funding was $308,000. So in fact, we'll be doing this program for 4 years and no charge to the participants. We do ask for family, parents to be involved in the program, which can be challenging. But we're reaching out to all of our PAC sites, or Phoenix After School sites, our churches and other agencies. And so far, we are very optimistic that the program's not only effective, but is a wonderful collaboration as a public-private partnership with ASU. So thank you, and we're happy to take any questions.
Any questions? I have some questions. So this will be then, it sounds like it's expanding to all PAC sites because it started at the South Mountain Community Center?
Correct. It's starting at South Mountain Community Center, and our involvement with PAC is just that the PAC sites are in the South Mountain area that we are recruiting families. So it's Frank's worked diligently with those sites to make sure they have flyers. So it's really PAC becomes a feeder to come to the South Mountain Community Center at this point.
Got it. So have we done heavy recruitment? Because I'm, just because it's the largest school district in that area from Roosevelt School District, I'm assuming that majority of the kids are from Roosevelt and some are from charter. Okay. So, because I know TG Bar is near there. There are South Mountain. The high schoolers won't hit here, but they have younger siblings. So I'm just, because I come from that area and understand that area, I know where you can go. And so it sounds like we're recruiting from the PAC centers, but also there's other areas where we can recruit in order to make sure we maximize our area. How many students can we recruit? Do you know?
Participants into the program?
Participants, yeah.
Well, the main limitation is how many we can take and reasonably accommodate. It appears that about 50 families in one group is probably our max.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is a lot.
But Madam Chair, I think it's very important that we continue to do the outreach. And when we started this as a pilot program 2 years ago, the health agencies were very instrumental in helping us. And we've now extended that to the PAC sites as well as churches. But continuously, I think your point is that we'll need to continue to reach out year after year because it is a multi-year program. So we'll make a note of that.
It's just because some go, some move, some
Exactly.
get older.
Exactly.
They learn they learn the value of it and continue on. So, well, thank you. You've done really good service.
Thank you.
I have a comment. I just want to really thank you all because reaching out to the families are so important. I mean, we can educate the kids, but it's really the parents once they get home and there's a McDonald's meal or a fast food meal instead of having a nutritious meal where you can actually start to train the parents how maybe they need to start cooking at home and providing that type of food, and also the exercising.
Yeah.
Even getting the parents to walk a half hour with the kids and encouraging them. I know that my kids come home from school and, hey, Dad, we got to go do this. And, making it more of a family event instead of just gearing it towards the children, I think is so important. And I think that's how we're going to end up defeating obesity and all those problems we have within our communities once we get that whole family approach to it. So I want to thank you for including the whole family, and also the whole bilingualism is something so important, especially in that South Phoenix area. So thank you for providing the services in Spanish also. And if there's anything that we can do, that's actually in my district. We have movies in the park in those areas. So I invite you to come out and do an invitation to those individuals. We get a couple hundred families that come out and they actually watch a movie, a Disney movie, and it's a great opportunity for you all to brag about this great program that you have. And we'll hook up with our staff and we'll let you know when our next movie is.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Any questions? Comments?
Yeah, thank you for what you're doing. It does fit nicely with the overall, just the overall mission of Fit Phoenix, trying to create the healthiest city in the country. Of course, there's no reason why we can't be the healthiest city. Phoenix can be every single day. And what you're doing is some amazing work. 91% of the participants completed the program. I mean, you know, for those who are watching, and we're all thinking about our own personal fitness regimen, you know, I gotta tell you, if you know, every time I start a fitness program personally, I usually go for 6 weeks at a time. If I can complete 91, if I had a 91% rate, you know, you might have a different Daniel Valenzuela study for you. But that's amazing that that's the kind of stuff that you are instilling in our children, and of course, their families, because it is an overall unit, and this program would be good anywhere and everywhere, and it's great that it's happening in this part of the city. So great work. These words just don't, you know, it's not gonna. There's nothing we can say that is quite enough. You've done some really, really good work. And congratulations, and you know, anything that, I mean, I for one, and you're hearing other people say it, I for one am completely supportive of what you're doing for our community. So thank you.
So I'd like to thank you, and I also like everybody to know that on either Monday or Tuesday night at Cityscape, he's our Fit Phoenix guy, and he will be walking.
She says this. I'm on a
every-
fire truck on Mondays.
So Tuesday night we'll be walking.
Okay.
So Tuesday nights we'll Mr. Fit Phoenix here on Tuesday
We're
nights
all Fit
at
Phoenix.
Cityscape. You can meet him there, and you can walk around the Cityscape and get our mile in.
All right, let's do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, and Mr. Nowakowski will be cooking for us since he's wanting to do some healthy meals.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
And we'll welcome you all to District 7 with a nice meal.
yes. Item 10, Parks and Recreation Department Resident Priority Usage and Satisfaction Tracking Survey. Welcome.
Chairwoman and subcommittee members, we have Inger Erickson, who is the Deputy Parks and Recreation Director, and she is also acting Parks and Recreation Director this week for Jim Burke while he's away. So thank you, Inger.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. Today I'm here to share the results of the 2014 survey, which was conducted by the Behavior Research Center this past August. In 2011, the department conducted a baseline survey for assessing park visitation patterns, satisfaction of park conditions, and residents' preference for future spending patterns as it relates to preserves and to traditional parks. In the 2014 study, over 800 individuals were surveyed, and the data was compared to 2011. The intent of the survey was to generate statistically valid and comprehensive profile of Phoenix residents' park visitation patterns, to evaluate the satisfaction of the park conditions, to assess preference for park improvements and future park spending, and align the future investments and maintenance priorities with the use patterns of our residents. So the first slide I'm going to show you is the spending priorities. When we asked how much priority each of the following areas should receive from the City of Phoenix, you can see that in 2011 and in 2014, there was consistency in the priorities between the surveys. Restrooms were very high at 74% this year, playgrounds at 66%, area lighting at 65%, and sports fields and turf rounded out the top 5, just a little bit lower than the 60 and 70 percentile. When asked, in the past year, have you or a member of your household visited any of the following type of parks within the city of Phoenix? Mountain or desert preserves, such as South Mountain or Phoenix Mountain Preserves, or traditional parks like Encanto or a park in your neighborhood? 48% of the households said they had been to the mountain preserves or an open space area that we consider our desert parks. 71% said they had visited a traditional park within their neighborhood, and 77% said they had visited a city park within the past year. The results from this year were slightly higher than 2011, and you can see again that there's a large usage of the City of Phoenix residents of our parks. The next slide talks about when you go to a park, what do you typically do at a park? So park users were asked how many times per month they participated in 19 selected activities. The activities that rose to the top were walking, hiking on a desert trail, and use of picnic ramadas among the adults. Visiting a playground, walking, and using picnic ramadas were the highest activities by youth. As a part of the Fit Phoenix campaign, the Parks and Recreation Department has partnered with several businesses to fund Walk Phoenix signs and markers in 15 parks across the city. Each park has a sign that identifies the route, and at each 1/10 of a mile, there are markers to show progress that people can see how far they're walking. And finally, the conditions. The residents were asked to rate the conditions of the park and the maintenance of the parks. They were given the choices of excellent, good, only fair, or poor. 91% of the conditions and maintenance of the desert parks were rated as positive, and 80% of the traditional parks were rated positive for condition and maintenance as well. These results really were little changed from 2011, and there were no significant variations found in the question based on user demographics or frequency of use. So to summarize the findings of the survey, they support the spending patterns of the Parks and Recreation Department as it relates to improvements, amenities, recently added into the park system, specifically related to walking paths, improvements to playgrounds, and park lighting. These align with the use patterns and the spending priorities reported by City of Phoenix residents through the tool that we used. In the past 3 years since we started, the first survey was in 2011, and we followed up again in August. We have added 8.3 miles of walking trails, 40 miles of trails in our natural areas, the preserves and the mountain parks, 42 ramadas in various parks, an exercise loop in one park, 22 new playgrounds, 21 areas with LED lighting. So not only is it better lighting, but it's also more efficient lighting, and 2 new sports fields since the first survey was conducted. So again, the reason we did this was to validate our spending priorities and to see if we were on track with the community and what the interests were. This is one tool of many tools that we use in deciding how we prioritize our money, but this is a very important tool to use. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Do you know how many we surveyed?
823.
820.
Yes.
Okay. I have some questions, but I'll let you go first. Go ahead.
So out of 823 that were randomly selected by the Behavior Research Group or Center, do we have those broken down by zip codes or districts or?
I don't have that information, but I can get that information.
Yeah, I would like to
That's
see
okay.
that. I would also like to see the data broken down by either districts or areas of the city.
Okay.
And the other thing too is that it's kind of strange because I have 6 children of my own, and we're always out at the parks, either Monday through Thursday, practicing football, soccer, or baseball, and not seeing any of that sports. I mean, it says watching team sports, but actually participating. I mean, most of our parks, when you drive out during the week, you have 100 or a couple hundred kids out there participating in some type of sports activity. So I'm not really sure. I don't see that on that survey as one of the top 19 of teams actually practicing using our facilities. The other thing too is one of the biggest things that I hear from individuals is that there's a number that we have in case of emergency or concerns or questions, but that's actually a number that you call, and it's anything after 5 that nobody answers that number. if the restrooms are closed, or if there's a sprinkler that's just shooting up, or the lights are left on and somebody needs to turn off the lights at 1 o'clock in the morning or so. That number is actually a 9 to 5 number. So is there somehow some way that we can have a number, or if there's concerns, or if there's emergency at a park, that there's a number that somebody can actually contact, either a park ranger or a staff member of that area? Or how can we make sure that families are taken care of? Those are some of the concerns that I hear. I don't see that in this. So I'm just wondering what parts of town are.
Okay. The way the number is supposed to work is it's supposed to go to that line, and it's supposed to go to a rover. So if the system isn't working, we need to look at the system and fix the system.
Okay, thank you. What a great report.
Thank you.
So,
Okay.
Councilman Valenzuela, you have anything?
No, I love our parks. It's a great report. We just had GAIN, well, a lot of the GAIN events. We have more, I think probably in every district. There more to come, but this past weekend was the bulk of them for District 5. And it was an all-day event, and we had great weather, and I'll just take this opportunity to thank everyone who participated in GAIN. But many of those events took place in our parks, and it seems like now more than ever. I mean, I grew up in parks, playing basketball or sports or whatever. But more and more, I think you're seeing families come out. We're finding reasons to bring families out. You mentioned the Walk Phoenix, mile markers. People are getting their exercise. But at one particular GAIN event at El Oso Park in Maryville, you had the Estrella Supermoms, which are these amazing women who spearhead a lot of the activity in the community, and they had people who were dancing all the way to martial arts, of course, all the food, but they weren't the only ones in the park. This place was packed, and it was well kept. The bathrooms look great. The playgrounds are safe. A lot of people don't realize how much goes into the parks. And it's the stuff that you didn't mention that is not in there. We actually have arborists that are employed with the Parks Department that keep the trees looking great. All of those great things that go into to our parks, because the people and families in Phoenix deserve that and also expect that. And so great report. Thank you, and thank you to everyone who has to do with that great experience that I just talked about.
Thank you. I will pass it on to staff.
Thank you.
So thank you for the report. I'm curious to just look at the data, period. And since I'm a data number, I love studying that. So it would be great to see the zip codes, what parks were, what areas across the city. One thing that I was out at the GAIN event, and there was one particular park that does need some love and care, and so I'll speak offline with you, but I'm now concerned for it. So thank you once again.
I have one other comment. I like to see is that if there's needs, I know that in the Levine area, it's a growing area, and that some of the needs out there would be more soccer, football, baseball fields and stuff like that. But I was wondering in the future, if you actually do another survey like this, what are some of the needs of those communities, those neighborhoods? There might be different needs for different areas of the city, instead of kind of like doing a cookie cutter where we actually provide the same types of services in every park. There might be some unique needs in areas in our districts that other areas don't need. So I like to see maybe in a survey, if people say, what can we approve, or what can the parks provide that's not providing for your community right now?
Maybe a little more
Or like a
open-ended.
want,
Yeah, like a
Yeah,
want,
want.
yeah.
Thank you.
like
we
I would
can-
like to see in the future.
Okay.
A sports complex.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I did miss Leticia Marcus. I'm sorry, Leticia. I got so wrapped up. If anybody needs any help in translation, she is here for you. Item number 11, artist design contract for Artist Initiative Influx Public Art Project.
Yes, we have Gail Brown, who's our Arts and Culture Executive Director, coming to the table, and Ed Lebo, who is our Public Art Program Director.
Good morning,
Morning.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. We're here to request approval for an artist design contract for a public art project, and Ed Lebo will lead us through a very short presentation.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. This is our annual participation in Influx, which is an 11-member partnership valley-wide. And it's a fascinating project from the standpoint of what it has done for economic revitalization in some center cities, center core around the valley, and also how it activates underused spaces. Last year, we had an artist working on Dia de las Niñas holiday and participation at the park. We had hundreds of kids involved in her project. We're working right now with our partner departments, CED, Convention Center, Parks, and others, to see where some ideal spaces and highly trafficked spaces could be along Light Rail Corridor, particularly downtown where we have Super Bowl coming along in the next 2 months. Eric Booz was selected because the committee, which is a 22-member committee organized by City of Scottsdale, we had 3 participants on this panel. They felt that the way he uses classical themes in art and his brightly colored displays would be fabulous for some of the darkened storefronts and also empty storefronts that we may have around the downtown area and elsewhere. So the recommendation from the committee was for Eric Booz. It's a $5,000 contract, and staff would work closely with Mr. Booz and also our partner departments to identify a site and then identify the project that could unfold there. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
He was chosen by what committee?
There's as I said, an 11-member partnership in the Valley. The program is run by the City of Scottsdale, and so it brought panelists from throughout the Valley. There were 22 members on this selection committee, and we had 3 representations. There was a young artist, Ashley Macias. There was Lisa McCullum, an artist who has never participated in public art projects, and then also a representative from our water department. We saw this as an opportunity not just to bring in new artists to public art, but also bring in artists who haven't experienced public art to the panels to make some decisions for the city.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Nowakowski?
I have some questions. So this 11-person panel, we have 3 people from the city of Phoenix. Is this committee putting in any of the 5,000 or additional funding for this?
All the funds for this project come for the city's participation in this project come from the city of Phoenix. However, all the other partners in the Valley, the 11-member partnership, they're all contributing their own amounts for their own projects in their own towns.
And they're different areas.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like I'm relating it to like a MAG board, a regional group, and everybody participates, and then they also have their funding for their particular projects. That's kind of how I'm.
Correct, and if I could add one thing, is that one of the reasons that we've been participating in the last 2 years is that there's an enormous press value that has occurred in working through Influx. They've done tours of all these projects valley-wide, and that we expect that to continue this year as well.
Oh, I see.
My only concern is that I like to really advocate more for our Phoenix artists. I mean, we are out there telling people to shop Phoenix, buy local, to support our parks, our arts, and all that. I agree with partnerships. We need to create those partnerships, but at the same time, how do we support those local artists that we have here in the city of Phoenix? I like in the future to really look at supporting our local artists in a bigger and better way. Collaboration's great, but at the same time, having 3 people out of a board of, what was it, 11 or so?
22.
22?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's not that much influence for local Phoenix artists. So if there's some way in the future to look at more of a Phoenix, that'd be great. Seeing that we're actually fronting the money for our own project, right? The other thing too is, I just want to give you a lot of credit for all the great stuff that's going on, especially in downtown Phoenix. I know we have even on our streets, we have art going on some of our buildings and in the windows we're actually plastering like stickers and stuff of art pieces, and we have Grand Avenue that looks beautiful. I mean, our crosswalks are a piece of art, and our
Planters.
planners and all that. So I really want to thank you for reaching out to those local communities and getting those local artists to really invest and take pride of their own streets and their own neighborhoods. So thank you for all that great efforts, and hopefully this just starts to spread throughout the whole city.
Right, that's our hope.
So thank you very much for your presentation.
May I ask a question?
Yes, you may. I'm
Oh,
sorry,
thank you.
Councilman Waring.
That's all right. That's all
You've been
right.
so quiet.
Well, I'm not quiet now. See how happy I am? No, so this is not general fund money, correct?
That's correct, Councilman.
Okay, so, and there's $41,000 left. Why, is there some restriction saying this has to be used for a temporary project rather than something permanent?
Well, this is part of the approved art plan this year that includes this one project artist initiative that focuses specifically on temporary projects. But as you know, the art plan is full of other projects that are quite permanent.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. No more questions.
So it's kind of like a pop-up? That's the new term, right?
That's one of the terms,
It's a
correct.
pop-up coming in, so it will be located or wherever they decide. And it's for the Super Bowl, so we do a pop-up temporary space and drive economic development, and also have our latest artist in designing.
If I could add one thing, we're also, in temporary suggests a week, 2 weeks, something like that, but we're looking for spaces where this could exist for quite a length of time. So temporary could stretch for several months.
Well, thank you. This is fun and exciting. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So our next item is item 12.
I'm sorry. I
Do we
apologize.
vote on that?
Yeah,
Oh,
for approval.
oh, this item is for action. You're right.
Oh,
Okay, yes, we do vote on this. Anybody want to do a motion?
To approve staff recommendation.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It passes. Thank you.
Oh, wait. Do I get to vote no?
Well, yeah,
No, you
we were
can't.
asking.
Well,
Not on
you
this
said vote aye, so. but I
Okay,
never
so
heard
all those not in favor.
No.
Wow, I thought I got you, Waring.
All right, you thought you did.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Thank you. Item number 12, opportunity to expand reach of Phoenix 11 programming. Tony.
So Chairwoman Pastor and subcommittee members, Tony Macarone was here a couple months ago and requested approval to issue an RFI for over-the-air service. And now we're back to show those results as well as to seek your approval to issue an RFP.
Thank you. Take it away.
Good morning, Chairwoman
Good
and
morning.
subcommittee members. As Ginger mentioned, we were here in June, and we talked about the idea that we would love to increase a transparency effort, and that is providing over-the-air ability for our Phoenix 11 programming. Just to recap, currently our Phoenix 11 programming is available on Cox Communications. It reaches about 200,000 households in the Phoenix area, about 4,000 households on CenturyLink, and then also we stream live on phoenix.gov. We reach about 1.5 million residents per month. The goal, again, is to expand our reach, and we will reach about an additional 275,000 households by providing over-the-air or free antenna TV. We issued the RFI in July. 4 companies responded to us to express interest. As you all know, an RFI is for research purposes. So the 4 companies responded with interest. They all reached the boundaries of Phoenix, and some of them reached beyond the boundaries of Phoenix. They had various ways that they said that they would partner with the city. Monthly fees ranged anywhere from $3,000 to about $13,000 per month. Also, one of the companies had an idea that we could partner, and the city would waive our fee that we currently charge for the use of South Mountain. and in return, we would be able to air our programming on one of their channels. One of the other companies had an interesting idea. They also produce antennas. So they said as part of the agreement, they would love to partner with us, provide some free antennas to the city that we could give to residents while we're helping to inform them about the new over-the-air offering that we would have. So that was the conclusion of our RFI, but then we would like to come back with you today and ask for your permission to issue a formal RFP. After we get the results from the RFP back, we would then come back to the subcommittee with more specifics and options. And that concludes our update today.
Councilman Waring, do you have any questions?
I do. So, I'm sorry, it's been a couple months since our last discussion of this. So this is going to, people are bidding on this, or we're paying them to broadcast us?
It was a request for information only.
No, but I mean, ultimately, what's the
Right.
plan? Is this going to be money worth spending? I mean, I can't believe there's a huge market of people who want to show us for free.
Yes, Chairwoman Pastor and Vice Mayor Waring, there would be a variety of options that we would bring back to you. Some options include paying a monthly.
Hang on, sorry.
He fell or something. I'm sorry.
Some options include providing a monthly fee, and also some might include an exchange.
So it's a partnership. We're looking for a public-private partnership in this
Yes.
whole process.
And we will know more after we issue the RFP. We'll have more specifics to bring back to your subcommittee.
Okay.
Councilman Nowakowski?
So is there a possibility for them to actually sell sponsorships and underwriting for our programming, and that we have shared revenue when it comes to that? Or?
It was interesting, Councilman Nowakowski, the responses that we received said that we would be in control of, if we chose to advertise,
Right.
we would be in control of that. The 4 responses did not indicate any interest in them doing the selling of any advertising. And again, this would be for efficiency purposes. The same programming that we currently are airing that we're pushing out to the cable would also be pushed out to the over-the-air. So there isn't really any staff time involved. It's just the same programming that we're currently airing on cable would also air and reach an additional 275,000 families.
So if we approve this RFP, would you bring back, are we approving the process? Are we approving the RFP itself? Or would you bring back the key grading points? Or what's,
Depending
what
on
are we
the
voting on?
subcommittee's preference, we could bring back to you the specifics of the RFP before we issue it. Or we can create the RFP and issue it like we did with the RFI. It's up to the subcommittee members.
I'd really like to see the RFP before we actually send it to the full council.
Sure.
I agree.
To modify it, I think we have a possibility to actually create some type of underwriting possibilities or some share revenue. Also, broadering some of syndication programming from other people that, if we have some type of standards that we want as the city of Phoenix, maybe there's some programming that's out there that's educational that can actually be aired on our airwaves, that we charge a certain amount of money to have that programming on our station. So I think that it's a great opportunity. I mean, I think this can actually be an opportunity to generate some revenue for the city of Phoenix
Right.
and actually provide the staffing and the equipment that we need for Channel 11 to take it to that next level.
Great.
And Councilwoman, Chairwoman Pastor and Councilman Nowakowski, just in terms of outside programming, currently right now we do in fact have Maricopa County, their news magazine, if you will, that currently airs on the channel, in addition to Arizona Game and Fish, which those 2 shows are very popular, especially the Game and Fish. And those are both, of course, government entities, but that's an example of some outside programming that we currently do air for free. So.
And the other recommendation I would do is actually look at other individuals that are actually doing this and making a profit off of it, or a nonprofit radio stations like what I run, and maybe PBS and some of the I know the county has, I mean, the community colleges have a radio station, and how do they actually generate funds? If it's sponsorships, if it's grants, or if it's underwriting, I think that we should bring maybe some of those experts in and kind of help us with this whole RFP and really get the full bang for what we're asking for.
Great. And when we did some research across the country, there are only a few cities that are doing this as well. So we'll reach back out to them to get more specifics.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Pastor?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm back. I apologize for rudely interrupting the meeting. I am trying to go to a domestic violence meeting right after this meeting, and I couldn't do both with all the driving. So I'm on the phone, and somebody started a leaf blower right next to me. So no explosion. I don't
We
know
thought
how
you
much
fell
guys
over.
heard. Yes, I was like, where'd that come from? I'm sorry about that. So I apologize. So I did not hear the answer. And again, I apologize to my question about, are we paying for this or is somebody paying us? I did hear the discussion about possibly making some money on this going forward, but I didn't hear the specific answer to my question.
Yes, Vice Mayor, there will be a variety of options, public-private partnership, or other options that we will bring forward to the subcommittee.
Okay. So right now, we're not talking about a specific RFP because I did hear Councilman Nowakowski's comment about I'd like to see the specific RFP, and I would like to hear that or see it, and that's not what we're voting on today. We're just letting you go forward.
Well, there hasn't been a motion yet,
Okay.
but I believe in the motion, it would be to move forward in writing an RFP and bringing the RFP back to the subcommittee and us reviewing it and then asking further questions. And then the next step would to be then continue to move it forward.
Yeah, that's fine. I guess my underlying concern was, I'll just make up a number, that we were agreeing to spend $200,000 more on this project or something, and we're not doing that today. We're just seeing what comes back.
Correct,
in the
Vice
RFP.
Mayor.
Right.
We're not at that point. Correct.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Anybody want to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So is the motion what we just talked about, that it's going to
The
come
motion-
back? Right? That it's
I
actually,
I guess I'm moving exactly what Laura just said.
Okay, sure. I'll make the motion. So,
Okay.
oh, that's, okay. So we have a motion and a second?
yeah.
Good. I think it's great. I think, I remember the first time we had this discussion, this is all in line with transparency. And it's, we have a fair amount of people on this particular subcommittee, but let's think about how many people could not be here. And this isn't just for subcommittees, but it's our actual council meetings. It's other educational programming that we have. You're doing a great job by not only doing what you can to make sure all of these meetings are streamed live, they're on television, and they're also archived, which is very important. So anyone, not just the media, but anyone can go back and check the tape and see what was said and send their information in that way. Send an email to their council member or city manager or whoever. So for the sake of transparency, this is absolutely the right thing to do. It does, nothing is free, obviously. And so where in the priority list does transparency fall? And I think when it comes to government, certainly our level of government or any level of government for that matter, transparency is pretty high on that priority list. And so great job. I do appreciate Councilman Nowakowski's expertise in this. Obviously, listening to his questions and what he is asking, you could just tell he comes from this side of the business. And so I think that there's an added benefit. You bring an added benefit to this particular item, Michael. I appreciate you weighing in.
Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second.
All
Right.
those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, yay.
Yeah. Hey, Chairperson Pastor.
Yes.
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
Just for clarification, obviously we do have the transparency issue. I am curious from Tony. So everything we do that's broadcast on TV is also put on our website?
Absolutely. It streams live right on the homepage of phoenix.gov. And then we also provide links. We send out a message every time that there's a meeting that it's streaming live. We put that on our social media as well, so Facebook and Twitter.
But you don't, obviously I'm at the meeting, so I'm not watching on the computer. Do you have to watch it live?
No.
I assume you go back and you can click later and watch what you want.
You can,
Is that right?
correct, Vice
Okay.
Mayor. You can
I
watch.
was just like taping it, for those who aren't computer
Go
literate
in.
who might be watching. So you're taping it like you would on a VCR or DVR or whatever the technology would be today, and then watching it. You can fast forward, all that stuff on our website, correct?
Correct, Vice Mayor.
Okay.
The meetings air live, and then they are posted within 24 hours to our YouTube and also to our Phoenix TV on phoenix.gov channel.
So I understand the councilman, the reason I bring this up is to Councilman Valenzuela's point, and maybe you'd know, maybe you wouldn't. So I think I have read, I can't remember exactly, it's between a half, I think it's more like a third of Arizonans don't have access to the internet. Do you have any idea if that statistic is accurate? I thought that's what I had read relatively recently.
Vice Mayor, I don't have those statistics.
Is there any way to just do a little quick research, not obviously at this meeting, but for going forward, I'd be curious the overlap between people who don't have access to our meetings through television, who also wouldn't have, or I guess I'm looking for what's the overlap between people who can't watch on the computer and the people who can't watch on TV through some mechanism. You know, because we do want to make it as free as possible. Obviously, you know, if you get a library card, you can go use the computer. I know some people aren't computer literate and so forth. We do want to reach everybody. I guess I'm curious, my overarching question is, how many more people are we reaching if we're going to spend money on expanding the pool of people who are watching on TV? Because if those people who can't watch on TV still just go and watch on computer, or at least could, we're not necessarily really reaching them. I would argue it might actually be more convenient to watch it on tape on the computer than it would be to sit and watch it live at your home on TV. But I'm just curious if there's a way for you to sort of figure that out. That's great. If you can't, I understand that as well. So
what I'm hearing is you would like them to come back to determine how many do not have access to internet, and also those that don't have cable or anything else other than just, I don't even know how to, regular TV,
Right.
would be able to access our show.
Correct. And Chairwoman Pastor and Vice Mayor Waring, in talking with the Arizona Broadcasters Association in the Phoenix area, it's about 278,000 additional households that we would be able to reach by providing the free over-the-air, or as we call it, antenna TV. So you don't have to have cable, you don't have to have internet. It's just your television, and if you have a fairly good antenna, you can access quite a few TV stations now free over the air, TV channels free over the air.
and all of those are in Phoenix.
Correct.
So I guess my question would be, you know, we're not really expanding our reach as much as we think we are if of those 278,000 people, 150,000 of them can already watch on the computer. Does that make sense? So I'm trying to ferret out cost per extra person we're reaching. So if it costs us $200,000 to do this, and I'm making up that number, of course, and we're reaching an extra 200,000 people, then it's $1 a person, because then 78,000 could have gotten it before on the computer.
Yeah,
I know I'm not phrasing this particularly well, but if it's possible to ferret out that number, that's what I'm looking for.
more than likely, if we're looking at this, more than likely some would have access to computer or have internet and not cable. But I think that would be difficult, and I'm pushing for them to research this, but I think that would be hard to determine who has cable and who has internet. I think that would be challenging, but we could ask the question.
I mean, I've definitely seen statistics about how many people don't have access to the internet, say in Arizona. I don't remember if it was Phoenix-based, but definitely. So somebody out there is researching that.
Right.
Given marketing the way it is today, somebody's checking that somewhere. I don't know if there's going to be a crosshatch overlap, but if there is such a thing, and it can be found, without spending tons of time, I would be curious what that is, because say we're spending $200,000, and we're only picking up 50 extra people who didn't ask it before. We're not doing a whole heck of a lot for transparency, and that's pretty expensive per person. So I guess to sort of, not a counterpoint, but to sort of add on to Councilman Valenzuela's comment. We got to also be cognizant that we could use this money for something else too.
Correct, but it's also providing access. It's a way of us providing access to those that don't have the access currently. But
right, and I'm trying to find out who doesn't have access currently.
Right.
In a more defined version than just kind of broad numbers was given.
Well, thank you, Councilman Waring. Councilman Nowakowski?
For the Vice Mayor, just some clarification is that about 3-4 years ago, all TV and radio stations changed from analog to digital. And basically, digital gave you an extra 2 legs or extra 2 different stations. So when you flip on your television, if you're not on cable, you have, like, for example, Channel 12. You have Channel 12, Channel 2-1, Channel 212,
right.
2. So basically, what I'm hearing is that there might be a possibility if we allow somebody to use our mountain antenna to transmit for free, that they'll give us one of those legs that would probably go beyond the city of Phoenix, and we can actually have Channel 11 beyond the city of Phoenix by exchanging or doing a trade for our antenna space for their digital channel. And so I think it's a great opportunity for the city of Phoenix.
Oh, I'm all for the concept. It's just we don't know how much it's going to cost us potentially, or how much we can recoup,
and then the other thing,
how many people we're reaching.
I was just wondering, how long are the programs or the council meetings or the subcommittee meetings on the archives? So if somebody does want to go to a library and they want to watch the subcommittee, they can actually.
I can answer that. Chairwoman Pastor, Councilman Nowakowski, in terms of archives, they're a year on video on demand on the web just because of the space it takes for the city network. But we keep, if we were to get a public record about a meeting 5 years ago, we have them a hard copy archives at the channel.
And going back to what Councilman Valenzuela was talking about, the whole transparency and openness, I think we should actually run some spots or announcing the council meeting. Today we're having Parks and what's our
subcommittee?
Our subcommittee's meeting happening today at this certain time. So if somebody is flipping through the channel, they can actually know that there is going to be a formal meeting, a subcommittee meeting, or a policy meeting, and just running kind of like little commercials, right?
Right. Yeah. Great, thank you, Councilman. Vice Mayor Waring, just one more point to our discussion. Yes. When I was talking with Inger Erickson from Parks this morning, and she is here also if you have any more, or if the subcommittee members have any more specific questions, because Parks is the department that oversees the lease agreements at South Mountain. But the average for the type of station that we are looking for, which is low power, it's about $29,000 a year. That's to give you an idea of...
No, I appreciate that. You did say if you have any more questions with trepidation. It hurt my feelings. I'm kidding, Tony.
I apologize, Vice Mayor.
That wasn't intent.
I'm sorry to go on and on. I was curious. I don't know how much this stuff costs and how many people we're talking about. But okay, all right, that's certainly better than I had feared it might be cost-wise. So.
Great.
Thank you, Councilman Waring. Thank you, ladies. Done a great job. You have your questions, and look forward to seeing you at the next subcommittee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 13, approval of Head Start cost per child funding proposal. Mr. Gallegos?
This is our last item that's scheduled for action today. And this item we brought before you last month as information only. And so staff was able to get input from the subcommittee as well as community members, and we're back today for requesting approval. So we have Deputy City Manager Deanna Janovich, Mo Gallegos, who's our Human Services Director, and Pat Nightingale, Deputy Human Services Director.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, And now for the most important item of the day, in my opinion. We're here back to talk to you about the important issue of Head Start funding. I just want to just briefly give the little bit of background, or some of the background that we gave to you the last month when we were here. The funding levels that we currently are utilizing were determined back in 1999 when the city established cost reimbursement contracts. This negotiation and this implementation resulted in a funding per child, or a cost per child, that ranges anywhere from $3,994 on the low end to $6,948 on the high end. And just as a reminder, funding generally changes only when there's an expansion of slots awarded by Health and Human Services, there's a cost of living increase by the Office of Head Start, or when slots are reallocated. As we spoke to you last month, we came back after a lot of work over the summer, where we had developed a new model of funding based upon the size of the different delegate agencies that we have, starting with smaller agencies, and recognizing when you are smaller, there is a bit more cost and less administrative efficiency. So we had a model that started at $4,900 per child and went down as the delegate agency grew to a low of $4,500. After the subcommittee meeting and listening to all of the great input that we had, we went back and met with the delegate agencies again for a couple of times in order to get prepared to come to you here today. There were several things that we talked about in addition to the phase-in model that was suggested and other things. One of the things that the delegate agencies said is that, you know, you're proposing to move the funding around, and we appreciate that in a more equitable way, but is there any way that you could possibly increase the model, actually put more dollars to the model? They also said for those that were going to result in an increase, to please cause the increase, if it's passed, to occur as quickly as possible, and for those that would have decreases, could it please be phased in, as was suggested, in 2 to 3 years. So we went back, put pencil to paper, started crunching some things, and went back to the delegate agencies, and we're now here to propose to you a revised model. We're proposing that we increase the funding levels by $100 per child, and I'll show you that in just one moment. This fund increase would come from efficiencies in our program. You may recall when we had the sequestration funding returned to us, as a city, we did not put all of our positions back into play, and so we have that funding. We also, Pat Nightingale and her staff, have reorganized and are able to do the same work with 2 less positions that resulted in retirement, so they are vacant, and those dollars would fund the increase. We have also found a way, because of this funding, to implement the increases for everyone that would receive funding in the first year, and we would phase in the decreases over a 3-year period. In addition, since we have the funding identified now that we would use to implement the model next year, we are also asking to be able to increase the contracts for the delegate agencies in the current year. This will allow those who are decreasing to get a head start, if you will, on the reduction, and for those that are increasing to have some much needed relief to their budget as well. So here are the funding levels, and where the smaller agencies were starting at $4,900, we're now revising that to $5,000 per slot, and then it goes down the larger the agency becomes, going from $5,000 now to $4,600 in the end where we have the larger agencies. So when you apply this model to the delegate agency structure as we have today, we find that we still have 4 delegate agencies that would in fact have decreases. Those decreases are less than they were in the revised model, but still decreases. So the 4 that would have decreases are Booker T. Washington, Deer Valley, Greater Phoenix Urban League, and Wilson School District. So this slide shows the effect of a 3-year phase-in model, where in the first year we would in fact, all of those agencies that are receiving an increase would receive the full increase, and those that are having a reduction we would phase that reduction in over a 3-year period, with one exception. The Greater Phoenix Urban League has indicated that with their reduction in the size of their agency, they believe they can absorb the reduction in the first year, allowing some ease in the overall model, and so we appreciate that support. Before I make my final statement, just like to say that over the summer, we've had a lot of discussions, and I believe that between staff and the partnership with the delegate agencies and many others, we are bringing to you what I believe is a proposal that is not only equitable, but really tries to address all of the issues we've heard. So, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we're asking the Parks, Arts, Transparency, and Education Subcommittee, and you act as the governing board for the Head Start program, to approve the proposed cost per child methodology as is revised to fund the Head Start delegate agencies. We're also requesting that you recommend City Council approve increases to the delegate agency contracts in the current fiscal year. And that concludes our presentation.
So thank you, thank you, thank you. But before I attain a motion, I would like to have those that put in, would like to speak, come up. And I am going to, let's see, Susan Zebrick is opposed to it, but wishes not to speak. Yukon Domesato, she is opposed to it, but would not like to speak. Josie Ion was opposed to it, but would not like to speak. Angelica Ludon is opposed to it, but would not like to speak. So I would like to put those on the record. And then I have Jerry Martinez. Jerry Martinez, who's in favor. I think it's Michelle Pillsbury, who's in favor, who has given deferred to Jerry, and Diana Housden, who has deferred to Jerry. So Jerry, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you. Councilwoman Pastor and members of the subcommittee, as you know, my name is Jerry Martinez, and I am the director of the Alhambra Elementary School District Head Start program. First of all, I'd like to open by thanking you for the courage that you've exhibited in taking on this long-standing issue, and even more, I express my admiration to you for being willing to make a decision. I also want to characterize my remarks today as a conversation of discernment in which I will attempt to separate facts from the emotional aspects of the decision at hand. A lot has been said about the fairness of this proposal, especially how it hurts some of our delegates. But there has also been an implication that school districts have not been transparent and do not need the funding that is being proposed. I want you to know that that is entirely incorrect. The Head Start program, while a great one, is not funded adequately, is not allocated fairly, and does not keep up with inflation. Consequently, each year as costs increase and funding does not keep pace, our programs have had to reduce costs and make critical decisions while ensuring that we continue to offer a high-quality education for young children and comprehensive services to families, all while keeping our budgets balanced. For school districts, this has been especially difficult. With the implementation of the Arizona state law, which made certified bachelor degree teachers mandatory, we have faced adjusting our budgets to a different salary schedule for teachers. While having a highly qualified certified teacher in every classroom is a very good thing, we were forced to redesign our program delivery option to double sessions in order to fund this change. This move means that we serve twice as many children at 1/2 the personnel cost of single sessions. Our certified teachers are providing instruction for 7 hours each day to the 34 children who are assigned to their classrooms. There have been other concessions. In the case of the Alhambra Head Start program, we gave up our single-purpose Head Start Center and moved our classrooms onto primary school sites throughout our district. Not only did we save money formerly spent on building maintenance and repairs, as well as grounds upkeep, we were also able to eliminate transportation costs from our budgets. With Head Start classrooms located within walking distance of families' homes, there was no longer a need to provide transportation. Children now start their earliest formal education in their home schools. Transition to kindergarten begins on their first day of Head Start as they settle into campus life at a location that will be their home school for the next 4 years. There were sacrifices, yes, but there have also been great benefits that have been realized because of this decision. The classrooms we now occupy would be heated, air-conditioned, and maintained, whether they were occupied by Head Start or not. While we did not relish leaving our beautiful preschool center, it was necessary in order to exercise fiscal integrity and stewardship. There have been other decisions that have been painful. The decision was made 4 years ago to give up field trips in order to balance our budget. We now seek out community resources that bring enrichment activities into our classrooms. Although it is all we can currently afford to do, it is a poor substitute for the excitement a child experiences as they step into the world of the Phoenix Zoo or the Children's Museum. A long-standing Head Start tradition of teachers sharing meals with children as they model manners, serving oneself, and table conversation is a thing of the past. We can no longer support that practice financially. We have eliminated key positions in our program, including our family and community partnership specialist and our program support facilitator. These are just a few of the examples of the sacrifices we have made in order to balance our budget. The bottom line, though, is that in spite of these difficult decisions, I can stand before you today and assure you that every child in our program receives a high-quality education every day, and that families' needs are met through quality services provided by the Alhambra program staff members, City of Phoenix caseworkers, and specialists. We, as school districts, cannot continue this road. We are at a critical breaking point in our Head Start program where the budget is so fragile, we truly struggle to make it work. And quite honestly, we have been suffering in silence. We have raised the issue, yes, but not with the passion and the resolve that we now feel. The reason we feel this way is because you have given us the courage by your willingness to tackle the inequity in our funding structure. But talking and listening is not enough. We need you to act upon it and pass this model, which will make funding more equitable and at least start us on the road to a more just and level playing field. I want to thank the city staff and my fellow Head Start directors, their superintendents and CEOs. The dialogue we have been having, while one of the most difficult in our history, has also been one of the most honest and rewarding we have ever had. So members of the subcommittee, I urge you to pass this cost per child methodology and bring fairness to this funding issue. We are counting on you to do the right thing and make your decision based on what is right for the children and families we serve. We are confident that is what you will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me get this reset. The next person is Councilman Calvin Good.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to discuss this most important issue with the subcommittee. I think all of you know that I served on the Phoenix City Council from 72 to 94, 22 years. During all of that time, I supported the Head Start program, and I have great feelings for it. We did establish the Booker T. Washington Child Development Center, and I think at this time we were the second. I think Reverend Brooks established one at Southminster, and then Booker T. Washington came along in for all of these years we have served the children of that area. And we've had a great program there. One of the questions I have is say something in the proposed motion to get to this. Some of this information I just read today, so it's trying to keep up with some of the things here. But anyway, it's said to take action right away. Am I to conclude in my analysis that you do have some extra money, that can happen? are you thinking about taking away some of the money during this year from Booker T or some of the other programs?
Mo, can you answer that question?
No, we're not taking any money away this year. The model would be implemented next year.
It's phasing in, correct?
Yes, and it's phased in, so 1/3 of the money would be reduced next year, and then 1/3 the following 2 years.
And
Well,
we are
let me-
proposing to put in additional funding for this year.
Where would that funding come from?
That is from our staff efficiencies. We, in the
$100.
sequestration, we did not restore all of our staff positions that we had eliminated. So we have that, and then we also, as part of the core process, we did some reorganization, and we were able to eliminate 2 other positions. So it's those fundings that we will put in this year, and then that's what we use to add an extra $100 for next year. And part of the idea was by giving them additional this year, if they had something major, they could do it this year with that additional funding rather than the next 3 years.
And I just want to get cleared, you did speak to the Booker T. Washington delegation. And this is,
Yes.
was an agreement and explained to them.
Yeah, Madam Chair, in the first delegate agency meeting that we had following your subcommittee meeting, the delegate director was there for Booker T. We also met the following Friday with, I believe, four members of the Booker T. Washington board, as well as their policy council chair and their delegate director.
Okay, thank you.
May I
Yes, continue.
thank you for that clarification because it wasn't clear here. So Booker T. Washington's budget will not be touched for the rest of this fiscal year, is that correct?
That is correct, except for if you give us the authorization to move forward to council, we would actually provide an increase this year to all delegate agencies.
Okay.
Now, one of our members, and certainly there's differences of opinion in terms of our board, but one of the members, Dr. George L. Polk, has prepared a statement here expressing his concerns, and he wanted me to read it, but why don't I just pass it to you so you can get it in the records. We appreciate one of the council members coming to visit our program. Mr. Valenzuela, thank you very much. We appreciate that. And the city manager did come and view our program, and we're grateful to that. And certainly I would invite any of you to come and look at our program, talk with our parents, and so you can have a better understanding of the kind of quality education we've offered these young people since 1967. And we have outstanding facilities, and it's our judgment that we don't want to compromise. So we're looking with bated breath that you don't take away funds that will make our program not do the kind of things that we think young people ought to have. Again, thank you. I know it's a thankless job, and I know it's difficult because I work with it for, as I indicated, all the time I was on the city council. And the Booker T. Washington Child Development Center, again, is the oldest program now since the one that was started at Southminster Presbyterian went out of focus. So don't cripple us. Let us continue to look at new ways of reaching these young people. And the majority of our students now are Hispanic, but that does not matter in terms of whoever comes to our program. We want to provide them with the best education possible. And I'm a strong advocate for early child education. So don't take a hard look at what we offer. And I know the other programs offer good programs, but I think we offer one that we like to think is more in line with the kind of education that our young people need. And I invite you again to come out and look at our program, talk with our parents, and see the kind of program before you cripple us. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Marvin Labato. Marvin.
Good morning. I'm going to hope that this is the last time I'm in front of you because I feel like we're going to be personal friends here soon. I'm Marvine. I'm superintendent for Fowler, and I just want to say, first and foremost, you have a wonderful bunch of directors who have worked so diligently to try to come up with a sufficient plan that will meet all of our needs. And I just want to echo what Jerry spoke to you about when it comes to school districts. Granted, we have a lot of other funds that come into our district, but Head Start should be self-supporting. We shouldn't have to use district funds to provide services to our Head Start children. And so when you asked about what additional costs do school districts face that they don't submit because we submit what we're required to, we went back and took a look at everything, and we went item for item, and it saddened me to realize how much more the district is actually putting into Head Start because we feel we're underfunded. And so we came up with a number that's in excess of $100,000 that we are putting in. And I don't regret it. I will do it again because it makes our program better. But the whole idea is the equity issue. And when Jerry talked about how school districts have to be cognizant that we have to have certified teachers, well, we also have to have certified administrators who can evaluate these individuals. And so that's an additional cost. Going to from single sessions to double sessions was a true hardship for us, but we did it. And we will continue to do it because it has worked. But we strongly, or at least I strongly encourage you to support the plan. They have worked diligently to bring forward this plan that we believe is equitable. Thank you.
The next person is George Dean.
Good morning. I'm George Dean, the president and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Urban League, one of your delegate agencies and so forth. And very frankly, I can't believe that I'm talking in favor of taking a cut in one of the most important programs in Phoenix, our Head Start program. The Greater Phoenix Urban League has been a part of Head Start for 50 years, and we recognize the importance of early childhood development. We don't necessarily agree with the method used to come up with the new cost per child, but we will live with it for the benefit of the children. Let me also say that we don't like the thought of double sessions. I don't know if you all have thought about this, but double sessions mean approximately 36 days less of instruction for those children. That's what a double session will lead to over the course of a year, and that is very crucial. You talk about 36 days, that's over a month of instruction that these children will not receive in the course of that year. So we have to keep in mind that Head Start is really for the early childhood development of children. And it's the children that we need to be concerned about and what they are going to receive, much more so than the politics and the taxes and the cuts and all of these kind of things that we talk about. So, like I said, we'll live with the cuts that we have, but we still find it hard, and I would ask you to go to the city and ask them to come up with some more money so that we can serve more children than what we presently are. I don't need to tell you, you know you're only serving a third of the children that are eligible for Head Start to begin with.
Thank you. Francisca Montoya, and then after her it will be Vincent Medina. I'm just going to speed this up. And then after that will be Hope Edwards.
Buenos dias, good morning. Chairwoman Pastor, Vice Mayor Waring, and Council Members Valenzuela and Nowakowski. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I speak before you as president of the Fowler Elementary School District, and on behalf of our school district, on behalf of our employees, but more importantly on behalf of our parents and our children who are students in this program, we are here in support of item 13. I can tell you that, we have had our program in operation close to 10 years. We serve 196 students
And we have had to operate, as you've heard previously from Superintendent Lobato, out of our own pockets in our school budget to provide support for this program, because it is near and dear to our heart, because we know the value that this program brings to our children in their early childhood development. So this, I believe, is the first step in the right direction for more equitable funding. We will be one of the beneficiaries of increased funding, and we welcome that because we need that. So I urge you to vote yes on item 13. Thank you.
Next,
Chairwoman,
Vincent.
I will be finishing on the telephone.
Okay.
This is my consequence for being short. Sorry. Councilwoman Pastor and members of the council, my name is Vincent Medina. I'm director of the Head Start program. I would like to thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak with you today. As my colleague from Alhambra Head Start eloquently stated, times have been very tough for the delegate agencies, particularly in school districts. In Fowler Head Start, we have had funding at $3,900 per child over the past 10 years. It has been very, very difficult. In 2012, the state of Arizona mandated that all preschool teachers that are in school districts be highly qualified. That was a challenging, difficult moment for us. There were tough choices that had to be made. Our teachers had to move from classified to highly qualified. We gained some, we lost some. There were tough choices that had to be made. We moved from single session to double session. We have maintained a quality program with limited funding. However, it hasn't gotten any easier. I know there's this idea and this sense that school districts have an infrastructure to support the Head Start programs, but we must also keep in mind that school districts are also suffering in terms of funding. Funding is tight. School districts are cash-strapped, and there's not much they can do about it. So in this point in time, I would really urge the committee to support this measure. My colleagues, the delegate agency directors, we've worked diligently to try to get a viable plan put together so that we could be on a pathway to equitable funding. I do appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. And Hope.
Good morning, Madam Chairperson,
Morning.
and to other members of the council. I'm Hope Edwards. I'm the director for the Wilson Head Start program. Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity. This is the second time that I've come and spoke to you on this matter. We are the smallest delegate agency under the city of Phoenix with 132 children. We're in a small school district with also limited funding. We're not tickled to death about this decrease by no means. Over and over, the city of Phoenix have asked us, what can we do to help to make this work? What can we do? What would you need? And repeatedly, over and over, I've spoken for Wilson to say we're going to need additional support services. Our goal is always to maintain quality for our children and families, not just to maintain services, but quality services. And that's what we want to strive and continue to do. So the city of Phoenix, or our grantee, have stated that they feel that there are ways that they can assist us with being able to fill those gaps in services that we may have. And we're looking forward to meeting with the city as the weeks come to discuss exactly what that model can look like, because without those support services, I would not be in favor of the plan, because it would be very difficult for us to maintain quality services. So I'm looking forward to those discussions and meetings that we'll be having in the upcoming weeks. And last but not least, I would like to say that we feel that the Wilson School District, we know our families best. We know what their needs and their concerns are. So we'd like to continue to be the service providers, the ones that are providing those services to our communities. And just to speak on behalf of if this decision does pass, there will probably be other agencies that may need different support services in different ways, and I'm hoping that the grantee will work with us to help make sure that those support services are provided so that we can maintain quality in all of our programs, school districts, nonprofits, whatever. We all want to provide the best services for children and families under the city of Phoenix. Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. Ginger, will you read, or whoever, Mr. George Paulk's statement?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd be glad to. Booker T. Washington, Booker T. Washington Child Development Center Head Start Program. Statement of George L. Pauk, MD, Board Member. I'm a retired physician. I've had extensive experience in my career with medical care and community health. I'm shocked at the proposed adverse action by my City of Phoenix in regard to the federal support for the Booker T. Washington Child Development Center Head Start program. While some small cuts are possible, the large proposed cuts for our program will, in my opinion, definitely injure the children and community of this important part of Phoenix. The community, the families and children and teachers of this program are approximately 99% Latino or Hispanic related. It is a positive issue that the immediate neighborhood is known as a Black or African American historic site, a positive relationship that is a credit to Phoenix in that a moderate Black historic leader, Booker T. Washington, is honored in the name of his now largely Hispanic Latino school. This background information is important in my opinion because the unfair cuts in the federal budget that may be forced on this organization are or could be viewed as an addition to the race-related injustices that have plagued our city. The proposed cuts are patently unfair in my view. The per-student expenditures by the program are slightly higher than some other similar programs. However, there are clearly reasons why this appears to be evident and very likely not accurate. The budget analysis done to compare programs is incomplete and misleading. There are many items in that listing of expenditures that are blank in an unbalanced presentation. This is mainly the result of not noting the cost provided by the public schools to the Head Start programs. Those contributions are important, and in fact, they are a credit to the City of Phoenix. They are to some degree also derived from federal and state funds. They are a positive investment in early childhood education. The major point is to have our city administrators understand the additional positive contributions that the delegate status of the nonprofit Booker T. Washington Child Development Center Head Start program brings to our city. The delegate status is a positive contribution because it brings funds that are in part independent of the use and expense of the city public school system. For instance, it provides a family center, library, technology access, etc. Please carefully consider this important aspect of the economic analysis before incorrectly assigning faulty budget analysis to this program. I hope this information will assist your deliberations and governance. Thank you. George L. Pauk, MD, 10437 North 9th Street, Phoenix, Arizona, 85020, October 22nd, 2014.
Thank you. Thank you for all that. Councilman Nowakowski, you have some questions before someone makes a motion and we move forward?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mrs. Chair. You know, while listening to, I first want to thank you all. Thank you all for coming down and working with our staff and coming up with maybe a solution, but the solution is hard. I mean, it's tough. And, you know, while listening to Mrs. Martinez and the representatives from Fowler and Wilson, I mean, we're all taking cuts. I mean, the school districts, from the programs, from all the agencies and all these adjustments that we all have to make, from cutting field trips to staff members to actually putting our own resources of $100,000. And I mean, and then listening to George talking about that, it's kind of crazy coming up here saying that I'm willing to take a cut. But I believe that you representing the Urban League know how important this program is for our kids. I'm a product of Head Start, and I know how important this is. I wish we had enough money to fund every single qualified child out there, but we don't. What we have is what Washington has permitted to us. We're out there lobbying Washington for our fair share when it comes to grant monies, when when it comes to block grants, when it comes to Head Start programs, when it comes to low-income home spending, energy. But what happens is that our politicians in Washington don't want to take a hard stand. They don't want to make a decision like what we're doing here, saying what's equal is equal. And I want to thank our staff, because it's hard. It's hard to stand up here and to say, you know what, we're going to create equality for everyone. We're going to make sure that everyone gets a fair share. That's what we're asking Washington to do. And I hope that those representatives that are representing us in Washington, D.C. see what we're doing here in the city of Phoenix and take this as a model. How we need to be fair when it comes to federal funding for all cities in all states. And you have to take those hard decisions. So saying that, once again, I just really want to thank our staff for, I know that we put you all in an awkward position. It was a hard exercise to go through. But what I've seen today is that people coming together, sitting around a table, having the discussion, and saying we're willing to give up. We're willing to give up some of our funding. We're willing to put in some of our funding from our school to help out with the Head Start program. We're willing to give up a center and move them into a classroom to make sure that this program isn't lost. And I believe what I call this is the Team Phoenix approach, is that we come together and we do what's the right thing. So once again, I hope that those representatives that represent us in Washington, D.C. use this as an example of what is the right way of doing things and making sure that we here in the city of Phoenix get our fair share when it comes to those fundings for Head Start, when it comes to the funding of assisting people with energy. We might not have snow here, and we might not have a problem of heating our homes, but we have 120-degree temperatures out here, and people are with swamp coolers here in the city of Phoenix. They need help. We need that federal funds to make sure that those people that are living in swamp cooler homes have air conditioning. So we have the same needs as the rest of the country. So thank you for your hard work, once again, staff, and thank you for all those representatives out there of all those agencies and schools for doing the right thing and working together to come up with maybe not the perfect solution, but it's the best solution for our kids. Thank you.
Anybody gonna make a motion? Or
I don't know if there's any other comments. I'll make a motion.
Councilman Valenzuela, you have any comments?
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman. I appreciate everyone who came out to speak. I can't think of a more important priority than that of our children and educating our children. I did take the opportunity to visit the Booker T. Washington Center, and I was very impressed. I think the way you're doing things in terms of just how you're treating these children and caring for these children, it's second to none. Equality is important, especially when it comes to funding for all of our children. It's unfortunate that we would have to negatively, or that anyone would be negatively impacted at all. And it looks like there will be a couple of districts, and in particular Booker T. Washington, that will be most impacted, and that is unfortunate. Now, if it's going to happen, in the last meeting, you may remember that I asked that this would be done in a phased-in approach, and I believe that's what we're dealing with, or that's what we're contemplating now, to have a phased-in approach, and so, yeah, again, while it's just unfortunate that we would have to, or that anyone would be negatively impacted. It's important that we do it the right way. I want to thank city staff, Mo Gallego. You've been great in getting us this far, working with all of the delegates, working with all of the elected officials. Of course, your counterparts with city staff and other stakeholders to get us this far, to come up with a phased-in approach. we do need more funding from the federal level. I made it very clear. I think most people realize by now that I'm absolutely committed in continuing to get out to DC to work on federal funding for many things the city needs, from public safety to transportation, and of course, this particular issue for early childhood education. And so we'll continue to do that. And I know that I'm not alone. When I was there at Booker T. Washington, I was speaking with people who also went out to D.C. to advocate for more funding. That's important that we're all doing that. So, Councilwoman or Chairwoman, that's all I have. Again, I'm in support that if we are going to make this change, that it's done in a fair way, that it's done in a phased-in approach, while everyone continues their efforts in reaching for more funding, so that we're not making any cuts to any of these agencies, but we're only adding.
Thank you, Councilman Valenzuela. Councilman Waring, are you with us still? Okay. Well,
I am. Did you hear me?
yeah, I can.
Okay.
Do you have anything to say?
I don't have anything to add. No.
Okay, thank you. This has been one of the hardest of new assignments that has been given to our staff. And I want to commend you for your leadership and your guidance and your hard conversations that you have had with our delegates. To those that are here, I'd like to thank you for participating and being engaged. Engagement to me is very critical, that at least you have an opportunity to voice your opinions, to also be able to build your case as to what is happening. I think that's transparency. I feel I'm a strong transparency leader in that sense of seeing transparency and having the conversations and really dialoguing where we can come with solutions. What I like to also say is I'm an educator, so I understand everything that you are facing. I face that also in my second job and career, and I understand when budgets are cut, and you want to maintain your level of service at the same time. And in those type of situations, I, as many of you sitting out in this audience, become innovative, creative, and also become partners with others in order to make sure those services are delivered. As an educator, I also, and many of you in the education world may know this, and in the nonprofit world also, there's a book out there called Leading with Equity and Leading with Change. And I find this particular piece this is an example of leading with equity and looking at equity across the board. And so I feel that this is a positive investment. Every one of your Head Starts gives a child an opportunity. Every one of your students receive your love and your caringness, and I strongly believe that behavior or quality of service will go away because we care about our future. So with that, the other dynamic is you guys are all serving the same population. If it's Hispanic, African American, Anglo, Native American, Asian, we're serving the same population, and we all want them to rise at the same point. And they all qualify, and they're all coming from the same environment. So to me, that is just demonstrating equity. For Booker T. Washington, the fact that in that area they are serving a large Hispanic population, it's a testament of who he was and how he was and serving the population. It's the same, to me, it's the same population. It may be a different race, but they have the same needs. And so I strongly believe that will be continued, and those values and those morals will still be part of it. So thank you for being here, and I really appreciate it. Anybody going to make a motion?
I'll make a motion up. I first want to thank our chairwoman for her leadership and guiding our staff in this. This is a very tough process, and to create equality for a Head Start program it was a big task, and I think this is really something that's going to last forever and really empower our children in the future. So thank you once again, Chairwoman, for taking on this hard task, and for our staff for all your leadership also. With that, I'd like to make a motion to approve staff's recommendation.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Wearing on there?
Opposed?
I am. I'm here.
Aye or
No.
no? Okay. Thank you. All those, the motion carries. Thank you. Wait, I'm not done. Call to the public. There are no cards called to the public. Requests for future items. Councilman Nowakowski, I have the North Building on here.
Perfect.
Anything else? All right. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.